Okay.
So we're ready to go. Hangout is on air and live. So hello, I'm Josh McClure, and this is the TransVolve podcast channel, and I'm joined here by Heather Frahn, who is in charge of many different projects, including the Conscious Music Project. And we'd like to just open the floor to you, Heather, to just talk a little bit about sort of how you came to being involved with consciousness in music and all of your other interesting projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Joshua, for having me. It's great to be here. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I started playing guitar and singing when I was a little child, and I'm self-taught. So from a young age, I started playing from the heart, and I can't actually read music or haven't had any theory training or anything like that. However, music is very much in my body, and I started performing as a singer-songwriter, chick up on stage with guitar in venues and pubs and bars and things when I was quite young. Under the legal age, I was about 14 when I started playing publicly. And so over the years, quite quickly really, early on in my teenage years, I started to look a little bit deeper into my own emotional life and really started to use music as a way of, first of all, helping to heal myself from any issues that I might have been facing at the time. And I suppose that that in some ways has really continued. However, now and also really for the last sort of 10 or so years, I've made a deliberate decision that I wanted to create music that was the sort of music that I would love to listen to, and that is music that has lyrical content that is positive, that is uniting, that brings people together and helps people be the best version of themselves that they possibly can be. So around about 2004-05, I started creating an album at the time. It's called We Are One, and I was finding it really difficult to label the music as anything. I mean, yes, it's acoustic-y, folk roots blend, singer-songwriter sort of thing, but the real heart of the music is that I saw it as being music that had a conscious message. And at the time, I was starting to read a lot more on that topic of meditation and awakening and just evolving your own consciousness to be one that is the best it can be, higher, so to speak. And I thought, well, what about if I create my own name for this music? And so I came up with this name, Conscious Music, and I started to use this word, conscious music, and sort of explain what it was. And I started a website online around about then, around 2004-05, the Conscious Music Movement Online. And very quickly, once I put that up, I started to find that there were other artists all around the world that had that similar issue of they wrote this music and yet it didn't really have a place because it's not necessarily Christian music, which often has a really positive message as well. And Christian music could be conscious music. However, if you're not Christian, then you kind of don't fit into that realm either. And there are lots of artists in this same predicament. And so fairly quickly, the momentum of this idea of conscious music started to grow. And as I started to research more about conscious music, I saw that online there were also other people starting to think about this idea of music that was uplifting, that was positive, that made a difference in the world, that was socially conscious. So all of that happened and it kept evolving and it slowly hums away in the background, and it's really wonderful to be able to provide some kind of online platform and a resource for other artists as well as audiences that want to find out about where can I find music that I want to listen to that's going to uplift my heart, that's going to inspire me and be, you know, across a range of genres. So conscious music really could be jazz, it can be hip-hop, it can be heavy rock, it can be folk. But it's really about the lyrical intent, it's the lyrical intention that the artist is putting behind the songs that sort of deems it as conscious music. And then in 2012 we had an inaugural Conscious Music Festival here in South Australia where I reside, and there was a great team of people that formed around this idea of conscious music. And I remember our first team meeting where I sort of presented this idea to everyone that, hey, why don't we have this Conscious Music Festival? Because again, it was hard to find places to play as well, where audiences wanted to hear this kind of music. However, I knew that there were lots of people out there that would enjoy it, but it's trying to connect the audiences who like this sort of music with the artists and the artists with them, and find ways in which they can find each other so that the movement can grow. So we had this little festival, and it was really successful. It was great. We haven't had another one since, but it was definitely a good step in the right direction. So since then I've studied a lot more about sound therapy and looked into ways in which music can be healing in other ways. I got sick a number of years ago, and when I became ill I had to stop touring. I had to sort of have a year off really, and that made me ask a big question of, well, what is this music? Who am I without music? And in what ways can music be healing for me now in my life, in this time in my life when I'm healing from illness? And it sort of steered me in a direction of harmonic singing and working with Himalayan singing bowls and gongs and that sort of thing with meditation. And since then now I've become a certified sound therapist. Yeah, so it's great to be with you today. Again, the TransVolve project that you're working on, Joshua, is fantastic, and I've already put it up on the Conscious Music Movement website as another resource for people to tap into from all around the world and to find out about the fantastic things that you're doing with your team. And I believe that the more that we all can find out about each other and connect and, yes, use this great technology, and the world is a small place now, so we can all come together and help do our bit towards awakening in this world and helping other people to awaken.
Well, thank you too, Heather. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about what is conscious music. And can you, I know you have some sort of criteria. Are there criteria that are not connected to the lyrical content? Like, could instrumental music be conscious or not conscious?
Yeah, I believe that instrumental music could be classed as conscious music, particularly if the composer was deliberately making sonic choices that were about upliftment. And we certainly know, when we look at the great composers of our time, and you being such a high-class musician, Joshua, would know about this, perhaps even more so than me, but looking at musical intervals and their emotive qualities and how they energetically make us feel. So the difference between a minor second and a perfect fifth, for example, is quite worlds apart. The difference between, say, a minor seventh and an octave is they're quite different energetic spaces sonically. So I think that, you know, using spoken word in music via either spoken word or lyric is definitely part of the conscious music thing. But if it's instrumental without spoken word or lyric, it could still fit into that category of having an intention to uplift and to inspire people, because certainly sometimes the mind can get a little bit nuts and bolts and cogs go on with cognitive activity around lyrics and trying to, you know, understand. And the beautiful thing about music without lyrics is that it, you know, it's open for complete interpretation, and it's very open for people to access it in the way in which their body understands it, their heart understands it. So certainly, yes, instrumental music could be conscious.
What do you think? Oh, I have so many questions. What do you think about the consciousness of music made by computers?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's not a world that I've gone into very much, though I have done a lot of my own recording and have a little studio at home, so I understand digital recording and technology and everything. Yeah, there's a whole lot of info about there about this solfeggio frequencies, is it? Where they dial up specific frequencies which are relating to certain qualities and certain chakras and things like that. And I think that's a very fascinating world. And really, something that I've come to understand is that music, when you're around music physically, so you're in the room with music playing, your body picks it up. So the supple energy field around our body will be somewhat cleansed in a way, and moved and shifted by the actual physical vibrations that are in the room. When you're listening to, and that can come from digital music or it can come from acoustic music, but when you're listening just under headphones and you're just going directly into the brain hemisphere and through the cochlea and then back up into the brain stem and down into the central nervous system, that has you know, perhaps a slightly different effect or a different approach to it, because it's going directly and only in through the ears, whereas when you're listening acoustically, you not only get that through the ears, but you also do get the sonic vibrations going around you. When you're listening under the headphones, it's quite interesting to look at all the binaural beat frequencies, and, you know, say if you've got 100 hertz in this ear and 107 in this ear, then the more that you listen to them, the brain perceives that as 7 hertz because of the difference between 100 and 107. And so we know from neuroscience that 7 hertz is where sort of the alpha theta border kind of sits in the state of consciousness, altered state of consciousness. So that's another interesting look at how music can help bring the brainwave state into a place where we are more open, we are more receptive to change. As a sound therapist, I've worked with individual clients on a one-to-one basis, and I can certainly say and testament for therapeutic sound, which I see as being very beautiful sound. It's long sounds. It's the sort of sounds that come from polyphonic type bells like singing bowls and gongs and things like that. And when you listen to those sounds mindfully, i.e. in the present moment, and you sort of get out of your busy day and your stuff and your ego, and you listen to these sounds mindfully for, you know, perhaps 30 to 40 minutes, that is certainly going to bring the person into an altered state of consciousness. And then when they gently wake up out of that treatment, they're better able to look at some of their life issues perhaps and work out new ways of being. But those new ways of being in their life really come from insights that they might have had during that treatment, because most of us, most of the time, unless we're doing regular meditation or are connected to Source or Divine or God or whatever people would like to call it in their life, they often don't get these insights into their life, and so perhaps they can find themselves a bit lost or stuck in old patterning and things like that. So it's great to use sound in this way. And when you look at the history of sound and vibration and chanting and drumming, and throughout history, it's just a fascinating history, and human beings have such an innate connection, a tribal connection, a deep human connection to music and to rhythm and pulse and beat, and we've got the heartbeat inside our body. We've got a voice inside of our body. And then when we make sound, it creates all these incredible harmonics around our body. And yeah, it's just a fascinating world, and it's a pleasure to be able to elaborate on it and talk a little bit about it today.
So when you do your music therapy, how much of it do you think is psychological healing, and how much of it is sort of energetic healing or physical healing?
Yeah, I think that depending on the method being used, that it could be all of those at the same time. Some sound therapy methods that I'm trained in focus less on the psychological aspects, and they focus more on the pure vibrational aspects. For example, the Peter Hess method of sound massage therapy. Peter Hess is a German teacher. And he uses quite a modern technique, though some people do claim that it comes from ancient Buddhist practice. However, according to him, he can't seem to find any real evidence of that. But he uses the direct application of singing bowls on the body, so on the hands, chest, belly, back, soles of the feet, etc., and in the field around you. And there's been some interesting people that most people watching this, if they're interested in consciousness, would probably have heard of Dr. Masaru Emoto, the late Dr. Masaru Emoto, who died last year. But with his work in looking at water crystals and how they respond to vibration, resonance, and that could come from words, colour vibration, sound, chanting, etc. So this ties into the fact that we are made of 70 to 80% water in our body, so we're a great emitter of sound inside of our body. Sound travels through water at 3 times the speed as it does through air. We can hear whales in the ocean for thousands and thousands of kilometres versus if they were to make that same call through the air. So it's an interesting thing about water, that we're made of water. And so sound resonates through us really effectively. Now, the cells inside the body, from the research that I have looked up and studied myself, I can find some interesting things about how sound vibration itself affects the cells in the body. Talking people like Richard Rudis and Dr. Masaru Emoto and Dr. John Beaulieu, people like this, Fabien Maman. These are all great people to look up if you're interested in how sound affects consciousness and affects the cells. Mm-hmm. And what they've sort of found across the board that I can piece together anyway from all the vast research out there is that sound when our cells in our body are often inflamed and they're sort of a bit stuck together, they're not all moving freely around each other nicely, and they have a little bit of a malformed shape around them, and the aura around the cell, or the electromagnetic field around the cell, is perhaps a little bit dull. Now, when sound is given and offered into that cellular environment, what it tends to do is it creates a spike in nitric oxide, which is a gas, it's a natural gas the body releases, and the nitric oxide helps create more space between the cells, and it helps to create a better aura around the cells, if you like. And the shape of the cells becomes perfectly round rather than sort of malformed. And so the cells can all work around each other easily. The body can detoxify toxins out of itself easier and those sorts of things. So that's what's happening on a cellular level when you have a bowl on your body. It's directly on the body, sending sound directly in there, but also sound around in the auric field and from other instruments going to come into you. You can't sit into a room and shut yourself out unless you're in one of those chambers where it's completely silent. But you can't sort of say, don't come in sound. You can't come into me, because it's just impossible. So I guess those methods focus, they do have a psychological aspect, yes, but from what I understand, they focus a bit more on the physical aspect, perhaps. Whereas with other methods that I've learned, say with the British Academy of Sound Therapy, with Liz Cooper, who's a really interesting sound therapist and teacher, and she teaches a method that has quite a unique reflection practice that happens before and after the treatment itself, where her treatment method is more about playing sound in the field. It's not so much on the body like Peter Hess's method. It's more about playing it in the auric field and doing a chakra diagnosis for that client. And then afterwards, so they're not really touched during the treatment physically by a bowl or by the hands or anything. They're touched by the sound, and they are very touched by the sound. They tell me this. When they get off the treatment table, then there's like a reflection sort of process where they are invited to reflect on the treatment and any things perhaps they might have seen or experiences they might have had. So we work with resonance, we work with resistance, and we work with release. So sometimes people might resist the sound, particularly the sound of gongs, because they're the sound of the universe, they're the sound of all sounds at once, and people can't understand that. They want a melody, they want a rhythm, they want that, that's what the mind, the ego wants. But the gongs kind of ask the people to surrender to this sound, to surrender. And Let the sound go over you. So often when the gongs come into it, people might get a little bit frightened or resist. And that's an interesting thing, is you sort of look at that. Well, why did you resist that? And you know, some people say, well, I didn't resist it. I actually initially did, but then I let it go and I allowed it to wash over me. Well, that's an interesting metaphor for life then, isn't it? And what areas in your life, this is just an example, what areas of your life are you perhaps, you know, having that resistance to? Mm-hmm. And can you apply this technique that you used in this treatment to that in your life? Some people may also have release through crying or even laughter. They might feel like their body is getting rid of a whole lot of negative energy, for example. Sometimes old injuries flare up and pain in the body might come out. But when you think about a scar being in the body, say it's an old injury, think about a scar. Like a scar in the system is a little bit, perhaps a little bit like a blockage in a way. It's perhaps not flowing as naturally as perhaps it did before the injury. So sound, naturally in its own amazing way, will just slowly come in, and if this is the scar, I'd say this is a wall in a dam, and the sound is just going to keep slowly nudging and pushing and coming towards this wall, and slowly it will fall, or it will try and make its way through. That's how sound works. So sometimes old injuries can flare up like that, but if you then link that in with how the cells respond to this sound, well then it's going to help relieve inflammation. It's going to help those cells become more healthy, so to speak. And so therefore often those injuries feel better than they ever have before after a sound therapy treatment, even though there was pain during the treatment. So some methods do work more on the psychology, some work on just the physiology, but what I've found generally speaking is that it can be all of the above, really. And it just.
You have people singing while you're doing it?
Pardon?
You have people sing?
Yeah, sometimes, yes. And singing is a whole other. I had this great mentor in the UK, Shirley Roden. She was one of the first people that wrote books about sound healing in the 80s. And her methods are all just with the voice, just with the human voice. There's no gongs, there's no bowls, there's no music as such, it's just voice. And what she taught me was really that the most powerful instrument that we all have access to is our voice. It's in our body. When I sing, I'm sending a sound vibration directly into my body, and I can, with my intention, I can send it where I want it to go. And there's a formula in sound healing that Jonathan Goldman sort of discovered, which is sound plus intention equals healing potential. And so, you know, the sound just on its own isn't as powerful as, in his findings anyway, the sound just on its own isn't as powerful as the combination of intention with sound. And just intention on its own isn't as powerful as the combination with sound as well. So he's sort of looking at that Kirlian photography and things like that to show the aura around these objects and things and people that have done you know, intention plus sound together. So when you're doing that through chanting, I mean, that's why we look at the history of chanting and singing is just so, it's so vast, and it's so obvious as well that using the voice in such ways, like with kirtan and chanting, singing, anything like that, and particularly if you have an intention with the lyrics, and if those lyrics have a spiritual meaning for you, if they have an uplifting meaning for you, then that is definitely, I believe, going to make physiological, emotional, and spiritual changes in the body for the better.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if maybe conscious music would benefit from some really explicit intention setting.
Yeah, I totally encourage. I mean, I know myself when I write song, do I write the song anyway? It's channeled through me, I believe. I'm just the vessel for the song. But certainly at that point of starting to craft this channel of beautiful creativity into something, I'm using a direct intention that these words, that every word I use is trying to be the best way to explain this or to get this message out, or, you know, and trying to choose.
Actually, I mean, of course, yes. I'm sure that you're writing your songs with intention. I mean, you can't be a good songwriter. You can't do anything well if you don't do it with intention. But what I was suggesting is actually like some sort of part of the song that's dedicated to the listener setting an intention for listening somehow.
Oh, sure. I see. Yeah.
I mean, imagine like an old Barry White song or something like that. It's
Yeah.
a song telling the woman what what the song is about how he's feeling and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a place for that. And then another question is, have you ever put any binaural beats in any of your recordings?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
It seems like it might be easy enough to stick a couple tones down at the bottom of the frequency, that you can't hear anyways, that have a difference of 7 or 8 or whatever it is, 10 or whatever state you want them to be in when you want them to listen to the song. I mean, that's the thing, is I wonder how much could you really craft something that's halfway in between a song and a therapy with with some binaural beats and have an intention setting, and then maybe then some period that kind of then relaxes people and gets people into an open, receptive state, and then you hit them with the message that you're trying to deliver.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and it could be a really interesting combination of techniques using the binaural beat frequencies with subliminal messages, and then actual lyrics that are heard in the conscious mind. So we're trying to bridge the subconscious with the conscious mind, really, and that's a great suggestion, and I'd encourage any songwriter out there to give those sorts of things a go. I don't know enough yet about the binaural beat frequencies
they're really easy
now, but yeah, it's great. It'd be interesting to put that into songs that we hear a lot of that in the sort of meditation music and new agey music and stuff, but it'd be interesting to look at that and how these kind of principles can be adapted and adopted by songwriters that write positive pop music, conscious music that's the popular sort of music that you'd hear on the radio. I mean, if we heard 50% of conscious music, even just 50% on mainstream radio, that's bound to have a difference.
No, I mean, certainly listening to unhappy music with non-positive messages doesn't make people feel better. I mean, some great musicians have negative messages, like all blues musicians are basically singing about what they're unhappy about.
Sure, yeah.
As a longtime old school hip hop fan, it was hard for me to have to delete most of it, but most of it really just has a negative vibe to it.
I know this young guy who's really into sound therapy. And yet he is very into heavy rock, heavy dense music with the kind of screaming sort of vocals. At least that was a few years ago when I touched base with him. And I just asked him one day, I said, "You're such a calm, gentle sort of guy, and yet you play this very aggressive music, and I find that a very interesting combination in you as a person." And I said, "Why do you do that?" And he said, "Well, when I'm playing that music, or I'm getting that out, I'm getting all my aggression out." And so I'm not saying there isn't a place for music that where we can touch into some of those dark emotions. I mean, we all have them. However, I think there's a time and a place for that can help be of therapeutic benefit, to get some of this aggression out, to acknowledge those feelings within us. But then it's how long do you stay there? How long do you stay in that realm before it becomes potentially a place that you get stuck in? And something that he said to me was, "I do that so I can heal in a way. I can get my aggression out, and then generally he feels better." And I certainly know that with myself. I've probably written hundreds of songs that have never made it to a recording or even a stage or even being written down as a song, as anything, but they've been some kind of expression of what's going on. And it's just, I think about making choices in, if you're a performer, perhaps making choices in your set list. I mean, obviously you want to connect with the audience, and everyone has dark times. And it's through those dark times that we evolve. I mean, before there can be any transformation, there must be periods of chaos. I think it's the cymatics. I've forgotten the fellow back in, was it the 50s? I can't remember now. But he looked at cymatics, which was sound vibration through plates that had sand on them, and the sound vibration formed these beautiful patterns. And when he looked at the process of that down at a microscopic level, he sort of noticed that before the sand could flick up and transform into a shape, there was sort of this moment of pausing, and also that was sort of accompanied by this moment of chaos. And so his sort of suggestion that for anything to transform, there must be moments of chaos. And again, as a sound therapist, I can kind of see that pattern is true, because before people do find new ways of being or evolve and move to a higher level of consciousness in themselves, there's usually some sort of upset. So it might be a bit of crying, or it might be shuddering all through the body, or it might be a bit of chaos in their mind. Or
in my opinion, if you're trying to burn off those negative things, probably crying is the best, and then laughter is after that.
Yes.
And then getting mad is a distant third place. I know, just in my own life, I feel like most anger is really just masking fear. It's just covering up fear, and the real problem is the fear, not the anger. I mean, I do understand the idea of getting at your frustrations. And here's another thing also, is that, you know, there are some things in the world that are happening with other people that I think a certain amount of righteous indignation is in order. And there's, for example, a long history of political protest music and, you know, things like that. I wonder where's the place of those, because those are anger, but I think in some cases justifiable, at least in some viewpoints.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's one that I've pondered myself over the years, and in relation to conscious music, is where do these songs of protest and these songs of sort of highlighting things in the world that really need to be changed. You know, we don't want to have war, and we don't want to have these kind of violence going on, and you know, we want change, and perhaps again, that's that pattern playing itself out, where before there can be change and transformation, there needs to be some form of chaos. And that chaos, perhaps in this case, is symbolized by people coming together saying, hey, enough is enough. I mean, you know, there's a difference between violent it's interesting that some people say, you know, I will not go and protest at a peace march because I can't quite remember now, but there's an interesting paradox there about protesting against war and protesting at all. The word protest for peace. Protest has a violent connotation to it, but it still has its place. So I think that's a really interesting question, and sometimes these things can only change through people standing up for rights and for banding together. But you know, what I love about Gandhi's teaching is, you know, non-violence, the teaching of non-violence, and creating change through non-violence and through being that change yourself. That for me, that just, when I really embodied that in myself, that was something that made a lot of sense, because I was grappling as well as a person living in the West. I don't like seeing all this stuff going around me. I'm relatively comfortable, who am I why do I deserve to have such comforts, and people on the other side of the world that can't even have food on their plate, and I sort of go through all these things in my mind. But what helped me arrive at a place where I could at least step out into my day and go, okay, I'm doing okay, is that Gandhi's teaching of nonviolence and of being that change for myself, and knowing that if I can do that in my own actions, in my words, in my mind.
Well, one thing I've observed is that as far as the big problems of the world are concerned, it's the problem with the whole paradigm. The whole paradigm of sort of how we organize the world is really not very sustainable. And so in order to save us and fix things, we're going to need a paradigm change.
Yeah.
And a paradigm change really does involve thinking about things in a whole new way. And so talking about things you don't want and protesting is not thinking about things in a new way.
Yeah, yes. That law of attraction stuff is so interesting, and again through sympathetic resonance, like attracts like. So you have two tuning forks. One will be a 440 hertz, and I'm going to bang this tuning fork on the table, boom, and it's going to make a sound, and then I've got another tuning fork that's identical. It's the same, a 440 hertz, and if I bring this already vibrating tuning fork close enough to the other one that isn't vibrating, the one that isn't vibrating will start to vibrate in sympathetic resonance. Now, we know this from physics, and we know it when you put a group of clocks in a room, old grandfather clocks, and the clock that has the sort of the more louder tick-tock, the other clocks, after a few days, will sync to that one clock. I mean, this is amazing. So, we know this stuff. And that's why I believe so powerfully in mediums like music, and using music as a way to align more and more people with positive messages through the listening to, the dancing to, the singing along to, the playing of conscious music, so that that's got to be having an effect psychologically, energetically, and that's all making a difference towards healing the world.
Yeah, I think that the thing that the artists are the ones that are going to have to insist on this culture change that's required, I think.
Yeah, and when you look at the history of an artist and their role in the world, pardon?
The business leaders, the political leaders, they probably won't be interested in changing the culture. So it's going to have to be up to the artists, or maybe the religious people, to try to change things. I personally think that the thing that the artists need the most is to get organized and get collectively on the same page. Just generally speaking, I feel like art has been all about me for many years now. It's all about, like, look at this genius that I did, that's my thing, and then the other guy has his thing, and everybody's trying to express something, or many of the sort of modern artists are expressing things that are unique to them only, and I think that it would be good to try to get people to recognize the inherent beauty of the universe and try to reflect that in their art instead.
Yeah, and artists, they reflect life, they reflect what's going on in their own life and in the world, and so more and more we are seeing people step forward and expressing through their art, no matter what medium it is, film, photography, music, drawing, visual art, etc. They're stepping forward and using that medium to express what they're seeing around them, and what they're seeing around them is something they want to change, and they are talking about these sorts of topics in their art. I see that more and more now. In a way, not that I wasn't born in the 60s, I wasn't living in the 60s, but it's an interesting thing when you look back on the 60s and that revolution. There was almost like a birthing of a lot of conscious music in the 60s with Joni Mitchell and John Lennon and and the Beatles and George Harrison and other such artists. There are many of them from that era that were talking about these sorts of things in their music, and a lot of it was quite political at the time because of wars going on and things. But in a way, now a lot of artists are kind of rebirthing a lot of that. But of course, it's moved on another 50 years since.
It does seem like this time, artistically speaking, is taking on the feel of an overtone of that era.
Yeah. People definitely want to unite together. People want to feel that they are part of a tribe that is making a difference, and they are. I see it every single day. People doing just little things. When it starts with the little things, starts with you. What are you doing? Not you personally, but what are we doing in our everyday life? How do we talk to each other? How do we deal with those trains of thought in our mind, those patterns in the mind, patterning that might be stuck in a negative mindset? How do we deal with those? Are we looking at ways to focus on the good, like the Rick Hansen teaching? Focus on the good, develop the good, because the brain is neuroplasticity is incredible. I mean, there's some interesting books out there on the market about how the brain changes. The brain that can change itself, I think, is one of the famous ones currently on the market. And the brain changes itself through repetitive focusing on particular ways or thoughts or intentions, and that's why prayer and beautiful things like that have been so great for people's hearts and spirits over since the beginning of time. We've kind of had ways of focusing our mind on particular meaning and significance that can really grow the heart space. And when I was visiting New York last year, I visited a beautiful Buddhist temple, and I did just a short retreat there. But when I was there, I focused on learning one of the Buddhist meditation practices, which is basically to do concentration meditation for a while, which calms the mind. It's focusing just on the breath. And then, you'll look through different stages of the path, they call. Basically, they're different teachings from the Buddha, and they're often touching on morale and ethics and things like that. And you're reading through this prayer. I mean, it's quite traditional sort of Buddhist terminology, but when you strip it out of that, basically what it's saying to you is it's asking you, how do you know this to be true in your life? So if it's talking about compassion for all living beings, well, how do I understand compassion for all living beings? For that tiny little ant over there, how do I understand that in my own life? And then you sit and meditate on it, because we know that wisdom is developed through experience. We can talk and theorize and intellectualize wisdom as much as we like, but unless we've actually experienced it, we don't really know. So it's when you're focusing on a particular teaching, it could be from any wisdom tradition, but calming the mind, getting yourself again open in that alpha theta state, so you're ready to receive new information, you're ready to take that in and focus that. It does grow the heart space, because I noticed even after that short retreat that I was there, I think it was a week, I really did. I walked out of there quite a different person, and my heart had grown wider, and my experiential understanding of what I've already been through and have come to know through my own life, it's sort of connecting all those dots up, really helped to make a difference. So, yeah.
How long was your retreat?
I think it was about a week, so it wasn't very long, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily subscribe to a current world religion, but I definitely think it's good for you to say, like, to sit around and meditate and say a lot of thank yous.
Yes.
That's basically, most religious ceremonies are basically a lot of thank yous.
Oh, yes. Yes, the gratitude the teaching of gratitude, and I'd love to write a song. I have already written a couple of songs about gratitude, but I don't think there could be too many, because really when we think about the things that we have in our life that we're grateful for, it means that we're happier people. You know, we're not complaining. Even I work in a public hospital, one of the largest public hospitals in South Australia, and I work there a day a week as a sound therapist. Now, when I'm there, I meet people who are literally facing death. They have a terminal illness, and I meet them, and gosh, they've been such great teachers for me. And what they commonly say to me, if they know that they have terminal illness and it is quite certain that they will pass on, if they have any messages for me, it's be grateful for your life, be grateful for what you have, be thankful, focus on all the good things that you have in your life, let go of all the stuff that no longer serves you, and know that this path of transition, or we call it death, but path of transition or passing over or passing through is going to happen to all of us at some point. We don't know when. So be grateful for this day. Be grateful for this breath. And often in my meditation classes that I teach, I just say, hey, you know, the mind's going to look at this breath and it's going to go, boring breath. Sick of this breath. It's too boring for me. What else is going on? What else can I think about? But the breath, without the breath, we wouldn't be alive, you know. So each breath is an incredible gift. And just to sit in meditation and focus on the fact that you're breathing is a beautiful thing.
Maybe you could make a song about gratitude, a meditation gratitude song with binaural beats.
Yes, that's a great idea, Joshua. And perhaps you could play some trumpet.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, that's great.
Well, Heather, I think this is a nice time to wrap things up, but it's been really nice talking to you, and maybe we can have you on again sometime.
Thank you so much. Thank you for supporting conscious music, and yeah, it's been a real pleasure to meet you on the screen here, even though I feel like we're quite connected. And thank you all to you listeners out there as well for touching into these videos, and you know, stay in touch with TransVolve. They're obviously doing some fantastic things, and you know, stay in touch with them. Thanks again, Joshua. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. So we'll go ahead and put a link at the bottom of this to all of your many projects. Heather has many, many different projects, and so there'll be something for everybody, I'm sure. Okay, thanks, Heather.
Thanks a lot, Joshua. Bye-bye.